Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be talking about the earthquake in Taiwan. I want to play CNN and then also local news. Let's play the local news first. Let's see here.
Nightmare. Tremendous is a platform that takes the stress out of sending payouts like Visa, PayPal, and gift cards.
A massive 7.4 magnitude earthquake has rocked Taiwan. That quake killing at least 7 people, injuring hundreds more, and causing heavy damage to buildings. Let's get right to Good Day's Robert Moses. He joins us now with the details on this devastating earthquake. Robert, good morning.
Tashani, good morning to you. In addition to the 7 dead, more than 700 have been injured and dozens were trapped. Not since 1999 has this island of 23 million people experienced a quake this strong.
Taiwan's strongest earthquake in a quarter century sent items flying off rocking shelves inside this home in New Taipei City and interrupted a live newscast. Buildings like this one in Hualien on the East Coast leaned at impossible angles. It's hard to fathom how they remained standing. Taiwan's earthquake monitoring agency measured a magnitude of 7.2. The U.S. Geological Survey put it at 7.4. The state-owned Central News Agency reported that 2 of the dead were hiking when they were hit by falling rocks. The quake hit during the Wednesday morning rush about 11 miles south-southwest of Hualien, a mostly rural area. Train service stopped across the island, as did subway service in Taipei. Landslides and debris struck tunnels and highways. Traffic on the East Coast ground to a halt. Students were evacuated from their schools and donned safety helmets for protection. As aftershocks continued, some covered their heads with textbooks to fend off tumbling objects. Earthquakes are common in this part of the world, but this one was especially powerful. One woman who lives in Taipei says this was the first time an earthquake scared her to tears.
And this earthquake hit as many people were preparing to travel for what's known as Tomb Sweeping Day. It's a centuries-old holiday on which Chinese people honor the dead by visiting grave sites. Those travel plans have now been interrupted. Tashani, back to you.
Sending our prayers their way for sure, Rob.
We're going to go to CNN now.
Oh, I feel.
Let's get straight to the breaking news. Overnight, 75 people trapped inside tunnels. They have now just been rescued after an earthquake hit Taiwan, the strongest earthquake to hit Taiwan in 25 years. We're going to follow this video showing a cloud of dust that you can see just settling in as the earthquake caused a massive landslide. The epicenter of the 7.4 magnitude quake, it was in a mountainous area on the east coast of the island. So far, the death toll stands at least 9. More than 800 people also have been wounded. We're staying very closely to try to track that. The quake hit during the morning commute, and look at this dash camera video just capturing traffic coming to a standstill as it all happens, and the highway very clearly beginning to shake. And then there's also this. One man, he was in a rooftop swimming pool when it all started. And you can see the massive waves that were caused by the tremors. We're also getting a look of how it unfolded inside one television studio. Watch this. So scary. So scary, no matter what the angle is that we're showing you here from all of this video. Let's get right over to CNN's Hanneke Montgomery, who's tracking all of this for us from Tokyo. Hanneke, what's the latest?
Hi, Kate. I mean, yeah, like you saw there, really, really alarming footage coming out of Taiwan this morning local time. So, as you mentioned, we know that at least 9 people were left dead, and more than 900 people were actually left injured because of this very powerful earthquake and the subsequent aftershocks. We also know that of the 9 people who died, all of them were killed in Hualien County, where it was very close to the epicenter, and actually where most of the significant damage has been taking place. And just for context, Hualien County is located on the eastern coast of Taiwan. It's a very popular tourist destination. It's also a rural area, and coincidentally, where most of Taiwan's earthquakes actually occur. So we also know that 56 people were trapped in Hualien County. Originally, that number was up to 131. But rescue operators were able to rescue all the people trapped in those tunnels to safety. Now, in terms of the rescue operations, the Taiwanese Defense Ministry has dispatched military troops to coincide and to work with local governments, try to get people to safety, get them out from underneath the rubbles of their homes and buildings. And this is really common protocol that you see in Taiwan when you see a natural disaster of this magnitude. Military troops do work with local governments to try to get people again to safety. But one thing that was actually affecting disaster relief efforts today were the damaged roads. You saw, a main highway from Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, to Hualien County actually partially destroyed. So military troops had to use some aircraft to get to that part of the island. Now we also have to remember, the context of this earthquake. It happened just a day before Tomb Sweeping Day, which in the Chinese-speaking world is a day when people visit their ancestors' graves and give them offerings and remember their loved ones. But of course, for many,
It seems to me that this is a metaphysical event. All right. Not all events are metaphysical. Some are man-made. Some are just a natural phenomenon. Now, many people would say that there's probably a crowd out there that says this is some sort of energy weapon that caused the earthquake. I don't think that's the case. Others would say that this is just regular plate movement, and this happened. But I think the metaphysical aspect of this, there's a lot of things that are starting to brew in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and in Asia. These are going to be hotbeds for the next war, World War III. All right. Now, it seems to me that there is more energy being, it's hard to describe what I'm saying, but there seems to be energy building up in the earth, or there's energy being built up in society where there is going to be these eruptions. All right. We're seeing eruptions in Iceland. We're seeing, earthquakes around the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. So, and the countries that are around, that are around the Pacific. So there's kind of like there's a rumbling, and perhaps, I can't prove this, but perhaps that these are metaphysical events that are moving towards a certain outcome. Just it being so close to Tomb Sweeping Day is really odd. If it was just a natural phenomenon, right? I'm not a person that says everything's metaphysical. I'm not a person that says everything is some sort of plan kind of thing. I do understand there's things that are just random. I've explained certain things that have been in the news recently that I think are random events and they're not planned events. But there's this, I get the feeling, it's a different feeling with this than I have with, let's say, the avian flu with the cows story. That I just think is zoonotic and just a random thing that's taking place. But there is this, you are seeing these things that are starting to happen in the world that seem to be connected somehow, some way to the red heifer. And, if this thing gets sacrificed. I would assume it would be, because the Jewish people have waited so long for these red heifers to be born. So they have to be. I mean, I would be shocked if they're not sacrificed. But there is this kind of like buildup. Now, why is this important? There can be some sort of knockdown effect, all right, from this. All right, literally the buildings are falling down and all this stuff. It wasn't a major devastation of the country, but there's going to be problems with the chip manufacturing now. So whatever that was being produced, you know, in the fabrication laboratories, I would say is all junk now. So there's probably going to be some sort of chip supply issue. I would also assume that things have to be recalibrated. So there's going to be, you know, some sort of lag time to get everything back up to speed. In addition, this puts the country in the sights of China. The country is weakened because of this. And so the country being able to fight off China is also weakened. So keep that in mind. What, you know, does this give an incentive for China to move in? The United States is already kind of bogged down in the Middle East. So there's this kind of like this metaphysical thing that may happen that causes a knockdown effect that leads to World War III. All right. I don't have that same feeling as with, let's say, avian flu cow story, or the story with the bridge collapse with the Dolly ship. This one, I feel it feels different with it. But people could make an argument that there was some sort of metaphysical aspects with those two, you know, but for me, I don't see it. I don't feel that with those other two stories. This story, something about it that just feels a little different. All right. It's like that little spider sense. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the health products that I have. I have the best toothpaste that you can purchase. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get a few tubes of toothpaste for your household. It has no fluoride in it. It has structural nanosilver. It'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce the plaque, bring down gum irritation, and neutralize pathogens. With better oral hygiene, you're going to reduce your chances of cardiovascular disease. So please go to the store and get this very, very high quality toothpaste. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. I also have lozenges that are made from structural nanosilver.
In Taiwan, those plants have been disrupted as they have to deal with the rubble and the aftermath of the.
I have Manuka honey lozenges in a 21 count, very high quality. I also have blueberry, and I have a honey and lemon drops in a 100 count. And I have a very popular elderberry lozenges in a 21 count. The reason why you should be stocking up on lozenges and drops is because we're going into the spring season. In the United States, there's a lot of change of weather, if people haven't noticed. So there's a lot of rain and all this stuff. So you're going to be indoors, and then you're going to, you know, it's a little bit colder. You're going to be wet when you're going outside. So you're going to increase the chances of extending out maybe the cold season. So, you know, be prepared, take some lozenges, neutralize those pathogens, soothe that throat, and they'll help to boost up your immune system. Now, when the rainy season abates, you're going to be exposed to pollen. So this will help to kind of reduce that type 1 hypersensitivity to allergens. So please make sure that you stock up in your house these different lozenges that I have, so you can weather this extension of the rainy season and then the allergens that come out for the spring.
Powerful earthquake they've seen in the last 25 years, Kate.
It's terrifying if you're watching this video. Much more to come. You're going to stay close to it. Thank you so much, Hanson. John?
Yeah, just remarkable images there. There was a tsunami warning in place, actually in several countries. They have since been lifted. Let's get the latest from meteorologist Elisa Rapp. Elisa, what can you tell us this morning?
Yeah, thankfully, those were lifted this morning. But yeah, tracking this massive 7-point magnitude earthquake just off of the east coast there of Taiwan. That was pretty shallow. We are finding, like we've seen on the video, all the structural damage, landslides. A lot of these buildings have heavy wood frame construction. Some of the aftershocks have been as much as 6-point in magnitude. So with the buildings kind of already loose in their foundation from the first earthquake, it's not going to take much in those aftershocks to cause further damage. Now, a magnitude 7-point on the Richter scale for an earthquake is very rare. Worldwide, we only average about 15 per year. That's across the world to get something this intense. And they are most common in this area of the world. We call it the Ring of Fire because that's where nearly 450 of our volcanoes, 90% of the world's earthquakes all happen in this area. And that's because that's where we have the edge of two massive tectonic plates meeting. And when those plates start to move and shake and rub up against each other, that's when you have these massive earthquakes. And this is the Ring of Fire. Look at where it goes off the west coast of the U.S. and then all across Eastern Asia and Southeastern Asia. And this is exactly where we see most of the world's earthquakes in this Ring of Fire. So Taiwan, kind of where it's situated, is prone to these massive earthquakes, though they are pretty rare. Now, in the cleanup for the next 3 days, we are looking at some showers possible over Taiwan, which isn't good for rescue crews. And for cleanup, we're looking at showers. Temperatures about average, a little bit above average, in the middle and upper 70s with some rain by Thursday and into Friday and Saturday, which again could be a problem with rescue crews and trying to clean up some of this damage. And you can see the showers that really roll off of mainland of China there as we go through the next couple of days, through today, through Thursday, Friday, and going into the weekend. So that's something that the rescue crews will have to contend with. But the aftershocks continue. That 7-point magnitude was the first one, and we'll have to keep watching these aftershocks and how they can already kind of rock vulnerable structures that are already kind of fallen, and the damage is already there. So something that we'll have to keep watching through the day today. John?
Yeah, we've already lived through a major earthquake like that. The aftershocks can be even more terrifying. Lisa Rapp, thank you very much. Kate?
All right, let's go to the BBC and let's see what they have to say for international.
Let me show you how we do stuff around here. Actually, my department uses Monday.com, so I'm good.
A work management tool? No, that's not for me.
We begin with the news that a powerful earthquake has hit the east coast of Taiwan, with reports of at least 4 dead and 50 people injured. The quake triggered tsunami alerts in the Philippines and Japan. Officials say flights were suspended at Okinawa's main airport as a precautionary measure. Now, the U.S. Geological Survey says the quake measured 7.4 in magnitude and that the intensity of the shaking was very high. These are some of the recent pictures you're looking at now from Hualien in Taiwan, where buildings have collapsed. There are also reports of power outages, as well as multiple powerful aftershocks in the region. The BBC's Rupert Winfield-Hayes is in Taipei. He described what happened.
When the quake struck, I was here in my home, and it was very, very violent. The whole building swayed, things were knocked off shelves, furniture was knocked over. I actually had to hang on to my kitchen countertop for stability. That's how much it was shaking here in Taipei, which is over 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers from the epicenter. So you can imagine that close to the epicenter in the city of Hualien, the shaking was much, much more violent than that, and it's done much more damage there than it has here. We've seen pictures of at least 2 large buildings partially collapsed, leaning over at very precarious angles. But I have to say, given the strength of the shaking, the intensity of the shaking from this very shallow earthquake, it looks at the moment like the Hualien and the East Coast has got away reasonably unscathed. I mean, we do now have reports of deaths and injuries. Those appear to have come from landslides which have been unleashed right along the east coast of Taiwan. The difference between here in Taipei and the west coast of Taiwan and the east of the island is dramatic. It's very rugged over there. It's very mountainous. There are narrow valleys, and the mountains come down right into the Pacific Ocean. And this quake has unleashed many, many landslides that have cut roads, that have brought down bridges, and we think have also buried some people. So it's still early hours after the quake, but at the moment, that area is cut off. But it does look like major buildings and major urban infrastructure has survived the quake.
That was Rupert Wingfield-Hazel. Our correspondent Shaima Halula is in Tokyo. Shaima, it's good to have you on. What was the reaction in Japan, given its own history of earthquakes and tsunamis?
Yes, it's been a very tense morning here in Japan. The authorities have initially issued a tsunami warning in the southwestern area, the first tsunami warning actually to be issued for Okinawa in the southwest and the areas around it, the coastal areas around it, since the 2011 major earthquake back then. It was very dramatic. We've heard from locals there who said that they had the alarms on their phones go off early in the morning, that the alarms around them went off as well, and that they were being urged to evacuate immediately, many of whom went to higher ground. Some were taking shelter in schools. The tsunami warning itself has since been lifted, but the authorities are urging people to stay on high alert. Earlier, waves of about 3 meters were expected, but now we know that the highest was a 30-meter wave that hit Yonaguni Island. Yonaguni Island is very close to Taiwan. On a clear day, you can stand in areas in Yonaguni Island and actually look at the Taiwanese coast. That's why the huge shake that happened in Taiwan's east coast, the big earthquake and its aftermath is being felt or is being considered very, very worrying here because of the effects that it has, especially in terms of tsunami warnings. We also know that Naha Airport, Okinawa's main airport, had halted flights. That has been lifted, but there have been disruptions. It's going to take airlines there some time to resume the flights.
Another thing that just popped in my mind as she's talking about the islands and how they're affected, I'm wondering if the United States has either surveillance stations there or missile deployment stations on some of these islands as some sort of defense blanket in that area, and if this would have caused issues with the defense. There's been some news out there. It's not, if you dig for it, you can see a little bit of it. There's been some reports, and I'll play one, where Chinese Navy vessels were moving in the region after the quake. This is why I'm saying that, are the Chinese preparing for something because Taiwan is weaker? Is it that this disruption, caused some sort of surveillance grid to go down, some sort of radio or radar or missile defense system on those islands to go down if we have it there? I suspect that we do have it. I don't know for a fact, but is something down that shouldn't be down, that the Chinese and or the Russians are taking advantage of, right? And if you go back to a couple videos ago that I did covering what Annie Jacobson said in her book, it doesn't take much for a miscalculation for nuclear war. Something that may be just an earthquake ends up having some sort of knockdown effect, and a certain party, a certain agent, decides to take advantage of it and change the whole geopolitical landscape.
The lifting of the tsunami warning here in Japan, the meteorological agency has warned people to stay on high alert, to stay away from the coast in the southwest. One, because the tides may change, but also because of possible aftershocks that could be expected.
All right, Shaima, thanks so much for that update. And of course, there's more from Shaima and Rupert on our BBC News website and app. But let's speak to Na Pham, a filmmaker who is in Taipei. Na, thank you for your time. Could you describe what you witnessed when this happened?
Right, it happened at around 8 a.m. So I was making my coffee, the first thing I do every day, when everything starts shaking and rattling. It was really, really scary. I have to admit that I was like thinking, what should I do? What should I do? Normally before earthquake, we receive so-called presidential alerts from the office of the president, telling us, what to expect and what to do. But this time there was nothing from them. So it adds into the scariness of the situation. I was holding on onto my bookcase, trying to steady myself because everything else was falling off the bookcase, the books and my glassware and plates, etc. And I could hear people screaming. They were also frantically looking for information and trying to decide what to do. So it was really, really scary for about 5-10 minutes. Actually, I mean, for me, it actually lasts much longer because inside my head it was like, what to do. Luckily, when everything calmed down and I went outside and I saw that the damage was actually not as bad as expected. More damages inside of people's houses than outside. So it was quite lucky for all of us.
Right now, you're describing 5-10 minutes. You're saying it felt long, but that is long for what you're describing. How did people in Taiwan react to this?
I'm so impressed with the people's attitude and behavior. They've been so helpful towards each other, ready to help. I went outside and, the MRT, the subway was suspended.
Just imagine if this happened in New York or Chicago. Just imagine that this kind of thing happened. You would have all of the crime increase. People would be taking advantage of other people. It would literally be a hellscape. Why? Because we have citizens that can't pull up their pants, make their bed, and brush their teeth. Don't be one of these crazy people that take advantage of things and some sort of earthquake or whatever, some sort of natural disaster, and they go and steal things from, I don't know, Louis Vuitton or Foot Locker or the Nike store. See, this is a perfect example where a society is more respectful for each other. And you look at America, especially the inner cities, run by Democrats, and you have a hellscape. So don't be one of these people, right, in America, that can't pull up their pants, make the bread, and brush their teeth. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the best toothpaste that you can get. It'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce gingivitis, and help to reduce cardiovascular disease. Because poor oral hygiene will lead to cardiovascular disease. It'll lead to inflammation in the vascular system, and it will cause valvular problems in your heart if you don't have proper oral hygiene.
And people start queuing to get back in when we start running again. And they actually form a very orderly queue. I mean, things we've never seen other extreme, disastrous situations in other countries, but people were cautious and helpful. And that proves once again that the Taiwanese are very resilient. They're very well prepared for such scenarios. In Taiwan, we see earthquakes every 2 or 3 months. This time is really big, but it doesn't make people feel like their lives have been at risk. They're very confident how they're capable to cope and to deal with such a situation.
All right, so let's take a look at this story about the China warplanes.
Metagenics gets to the root of whole body health with pure, potent ingredients sourced from nature. Clinically tested and trusted by doctors.
are monitoring the situation and responding with appropriate
I'm a
force.
therapist who goes to therapy, and some people think that's strange. The thing is, though, therapists are human beings, just like.
Amid the aftermath of a devastating earthquake in Taiwan, the nation's defense ministry has reported a startling development. Over 30 Chinese warplanes and 9 Navy vessels were detected around Taiwan's vicinity. This revelation emerged approximately an hour after the island nation was struck by magnitude 7.7 earthquake on Wednesday. According to the Taiwan's Defense Ministry announcement on X, 30 PLA aircraft and 9 PLA vessels operating around Taiwan were detected up until 6 a.m. today. 20 of the aircraft entered Taiwan's northern middle line and SWADIZ. The armed forces are monitoring the situation and responding with appropriate forces to respond. Despite such a big disclosure by Taiwan, China is yet to respond to these claims. Some social media handles also confirmed the development. Several users also shared videos depicting the presence of these vessels near Taiwan. However, the authenticity of these videos remain unverified. Earlier in the day, Taiwan also reported detection of a satellite by China near its territory. The launch vehicle was identified belonging to the Xichang Satellite Launch Center of China and was deemed as non-threatening. Yet, this revelation of Chinese military near Taiwan arrives amid the ongoing crisis following the earthquake. Meanwhile, the death toll has risen to 4 with over 55 injuries reported and approximately 20 individuals still trapped in the collapsed building. Additionally, tsunami warnings were also issued, but now they are lifted. The timing of China's alleged military presence near Taiwan sheds light on the delicate situation faced by the island nation, which is right now grappling with two problems together. One, natural disaster, and second, the geopolitical challenge by China.
Subscribe to One India channel and never miss an update.
So that is the Indian channel, One India News, that was covering it, the incident in Taiwan, and it dovetails into my worry. Is it that China is potentially taking advantage of some sort of weakness that Taiwan has, or a weakness that perhaps allied forces with some of these islands, perhaps their missile defense or their radar or whatever is disrupted? I don't know, but it's just odd. That's why I said that this feels a little bit different than the bridge and the whole flu cow stuff. All right, not too worried about flu cow. All right, but yeah, it just seems a little strange. Now, what it could be is that, all right, damage, assess how bad is it. China will be, looking, with its satellites and surveilling. I'm sure they're mapping out all of Taiwan to see what the actual damage is for military intelligence. But this is very tenuous. Now, the question is, why isn't this more in the mainstream news? Why is it more on the peripheral? Is it that the United States is trying to just be quiet about it so it doesn't, perturb the Chinese? I don't know. Maybe that could be the reason. I'm not sure. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and I have structural nano silver soaps. This one is peppermint. This one is lavender. They're great soaps. They're very high quality. This one's oatmeal. I also have a couple others on the store. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description, and get a few bars of this for your house. Lignans is really important. It's a powder that you take every day, and it'll help to boost up your immune system. It's for males and females. So please go to the store, get the lignans, and help to boost up your immune system. If you notice that part of slowing down the aging process is to boost up the immune system, and also by boosting up your immune system, you're going to be able to fight pathogens better and cancer. So boost up your immune system. Please go to the store and get the good night formula. There are many people that are having problems sleeping. You need 3 cycles of REM sleep for proper memory consolidation, detoxification of the body, and to get more rest, right? If you don't get into these 2 or 3 cycles of REM sleep regularly, you're going to have memory problems and you're going to have a buildup of toxins in your body. So go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the good night formula. It has tryptophan and melatonin in it. I have these applicators that you can get on my store. It has a nasal spray, it's a dropper, and a regular spray. You put the structural nano silver liquid in this, and then you can just carry it in your bag instead of carrying a big bottle. So this is a great way to take it to work or take it, you know, on the go. And again, as you know, using the structural nano silver gel, keep putting it on your hands, will stay active for 5 hours. You put it around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears for the structural nano silver gel. And the liquid, you can put in here and then take it with you in your bag. And, you know, use the spray or, you know, the nasal spray or the regular spray or the dropper when needed. So that's the applicators. And I have partnered up with Rainbow Herbals. We've created these really high quality deodorant bars for males and females. We have it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and we also have it in citrus. Now, many people like the peppermint. I prefer actually the citrus, but that's just my, you know, my preference. But they're made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Very high quality. It's for males and females. Use it as a deodorant, but as you're using it, because it doesn't have any aluminum in it, it doesn't have any baking soda in it, these essential oils, they're so high quality that over time what you're going to notice is that your body's starting to detoxify. So please go to the store, get the deodorant bars, get a few for your household, and you'll be impressed with the high quality of the deodorant bar. I want to play one more video on the earthquake. I don't know the quality of this one. It's SBS News, and you know this. I want their take on it. Let's see.
Earthquake strikes Taiwan. Israel apologizes for the deaths of aid workers as global outrage grows over the deadly airstrike. And one of the oldest books in existence expected to sell for millions of dollars when it goes up for auction. Good evening. Taiwan is tonight reeling from its strongest earthquake in 25 years. In the island's east, buildings were toppled, leaving at least 77 residents trapped. Authorities say at least 7 people have died, with another 700 injured, and that number is likely to rise. The magnitude 7.2 quake recorded off the coast of the eastern county of Hualien felt right across the island, including the capital, and the shocks also felt in neighbouring China. Tsunami warnings were issued in the Philippines and Japan, but were later downgraded.
Some ran from the billowing dust. Others stood in shock as their city caved in around them. Taiwan's tourism hotspot Hualien, 20 kilometers from the epicenter of the most powerful quakes to hit the island since 1999. Brick and mortar cracked and buckled, rock and stone sent tumbling from above. Throughout it all, screams. Within the crumbled buildings, trapped families. Help from the first floor, the ground level, all but gone. The rescue of others from lurching towers, proving precarious. The shockwave rocked the island and the capital, Taipei. Upstaging breakfast television, peak hour rush brought to a standstill.
强啊，好像房子快倒了。
对，因为它是这样子蛮晃的，所以可能也很久没地震了，所以就觉得很恐。
Most of my friends live in high buildings, so everybody, most of them are screaming.
SBS reporter Gareth Borum was in the capital visiting family when the quake hit.
We've had a few in Australia and around Melbourne, but they've certainly did nothing that sort of lasted as long or been as intense as this one has.
Some older buildings collapsed in the city. Other modern structures built to be earthquake resistant suffered minor damage. Residents still wary of lingering aftershocks. The tremors felt beyond Taiwan, reported in several Chinese cities, while Japan issued a tsunami warning to residents across its southern Okinawa prefecture.
Please evacuate to high, safe ground.
For those who fled, the feared 3-meter wave never came to pass. The order downgraded within hours. Taiwanese troops are now flying to the island's east to assess the damage. The reality of this disaster, for those now homeless, looming large. Nabir Razik, SBS World News.
Israel has admitted it carried out a deadly airstrike on a Gaza aid convoy that killed 7 humanitarian workers, including Australian Somi Franken.
I'll cover this, but let me just do a commercial. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver liquid I was talking about. You can put this liquid in those applicators, So I have 3 types. I have either the Max 14, the Max 35, or the silver solution. The silver solution is 30 parts per million. This is 14 parts per million. And Max 35 is 35 parts per million. What you do is you take a teaspoon of this a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. And, if you want to clean surfaces or, use these applicators, just put this liquid in there. So it's a great product. It has structural nano silver, and it will help to neutralize pathogens. And it's part of the anti-aging protocol to help boost up your immune system. Please take Clarity Factor. This will get rid of that brain fog that people have. And when you take this regularly, what's going to happen is that you're going to actually stimulate those neurons when you're getting them firing. So you're reducing the dendritic recession as we age. Our dendrites, the tips of the neuron, will connect to other neurons, and that's what we call neuroplasticity. All right, people can grow more connections or lose connections. Well, through the normal aging process, people lose connections, but you can stimulate these neurons and get those connections better, right, by taking Clarity Factor. And also challenging your brain, learning, moving around, doing a little bit of anaerobic and aerobic exercise, doing some balancing because you want to stimulate the cerebellum. So when you look at this from a holistic point of view, you're going to be able to slow down the mental decline in the normal aging process. So one of those pillars to improve mental acuity is Clarity Factor, but it's not the only one, because you also have to practice. You have to do balancing exercises, do a little bit of weight training, get that blood flowing, do a little bit of cardio, and because you want that blood flow, right? You want to do that balancing, so you're activating your cerebellum. And in addition, you want to eat a proper diet, right? Get proper sleep. I was talking about taking the Good Night formula. So when you do all these things and you're getting the proper sleep, the proper nutrition, you're going to be able to improve your mental acuity. So please go to the store and get the Clarity Factor. Another part of the pillar to boost up your immune system and slow down the aging process is to bring down chronic inflammation. Take ashwagandha root. This will bring down the glucose levels in your blood and reduce that inflammatory response from glucose in your bloodstream. In addition, turmeric will help to bring down those pro-inflammatory cytokines. It's also an antioxidant. So by bringing down that inflammation, you're not going to be in an inflamed state, and your immune system will be better, and you're going to slow down the damage of a chronic inflammatory state, and you'll notice that you're aging slower. So please take the turmeric and the ashwagandha, and again, the structural nanosilver to neutralize pathogens. And that's the first two pillars of improving your immune system and slowing down the aging process.
A strike, a mistake of misidentification, despite the charity World Central Kitchen saying it coordinated movements with the Israeli military. World leaders are demanding answers as fears intensify for the humanitarian aid system that's already hanging by a thread. In other developments, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has spoken with Benjamin Netanyahu, saying the killing of the aid workers is totally unacceptable. The Israeli Prime Minister's comment that innocent people die in wartime has drawn a critical response. And the UN Secretary General has called the killings unconscionable and again called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza.
Reeling from their loss, aid workers from World Central Kitchen gather at a Gaza hospital. The charity's CEO calling them heroes. The 7 colleagues killed in a targeted Israeli strike on their convoy. Among them, 43-year-old Australian Zomi Frankham. Alongside her, their Palestinian driver, Saifuddin Essam Ayad Abu Taha, dual US-Canadian citizen Jacob Flickinger, Polish national Damien Sobel, and 3 Britons, John Chapman, James Henderson, and James Kirby. Governments around the world condemning the killings.
We were outraged. We expect a broader investigation to be conducted and to be done so in a swift and comprehensive manner. We hope that those findings will be made public and that there is appropriate accountability held.
Clearly, there are questions that need to be answered.
To tragedia. Nie rozumiemy nadal, jak to się mogło wydarzyć.
The convoy was struck in an area deemed safe as it left a warehouse in Deir al-Balah, where the team had unloaded more than 100 tons of humanitarian food aid brought to Gaza by sea. Shortly after leaving the warehouse, all 3 clearly marked vehicles, travelling more than 2 kilometres apart, were hit, despite the aid group saying it coordinated their movements with the Israeli military.
This was an agreed mission with this team. It was deconflicted.
This is, the sad aspects of war where mistakes happen. And this happens all the time in war. Now, what is interesting about this is that there's infighting that's going on in Israel, trying to kick out Netanyahu. There's this infighting between the Israelis and Biden. There's not as much cohesion within the alliance between the United States and Israel, and enough cohesion between the conservative and the liberal within Israel. And even though this is an accident, this is what I mean by this is another metaphysical event where it puts a curse on Israel for its activity of not getting the job done in a swift way. So there's these mistakes that happen. Now people would say, oh, right, just Israel's being too aggressive. I think this is most like, there needs to be an investigation, but most likely this was an accident. But let's wait until the information comes out. But just my first impression on this, most likely it was an accident. It's highly probable it was an accident. And poor coordination, but that's saying that there's internally, what that means is that Israel is having coordination problems within the operations within Gaza. All right. Assuming that this wasn't on purpose. All right. If it was on purpose, then it's a whole different set of issues. But I don't think it was. There was probably a coordination problem. But let's assume at this juncture, it was an accident until proven otherwise. But I do think that there's this curse that's happening on Israel because they're not moving aggressive enough. Because this is also in line with these red heifers, right? The red heifers have a shelf life, right? And so, if they don't get sacrificed in due time, whenever that is, because I don't know exactly, that expiration date for them, there's a huge missed opportunity. There's this small window at a metaphysical level. So there's these rumblings in the world, these volcanoes, there's these earthquakes, there's these conflicts, and then there's these accidents that seem to be accidents, but they're like little warnings that something big is coming. Be prepared. And you can't prepare by getting rice and beans and stockpiling gold. That's not what I mean by prepare. I'm talking about prepare spiritually. That's the only way you're going to be able to prepare. But so trying to go run out in the mountains or in the middle of the desert or whatever and be be isolated, that ain't gonna work. So there's this, it just seems as though that there's accidents that can happen, and it's like these are like, I'll call them curses, but they're like minor curses that can end up snowballing into a bigger curse. So, this infighting, I think, is part of it. Again, like I said, Israel's being cursed and blessed, and the rest of the world is being cursed and blessed, and at different magnitudes, depending on, how you fall into the spectrum of this. So Israel isn't going to be always getting a blessing. Events during this war are going to always go in the way of the Israelis, and mistakes are going to be made. And it's going to put a really huge negative light on Israel. And this is part of the curse on Israel. But there's also blessing that's happening too. So I'm trying to look at it from a metaphysical lens. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think this particular incident, I think, is by accident, but it's an event that's allowed to happen at a metaphysical level. If God wants to have something happen, he'll let it happen. All right. Some things are very benign. I think the ship hitting the bridge, other than the workers that were on the bridge, they died, but it's a relatively benign situation. Everyone was, all the conspiracy theorists out there, had a field day, but it's a relatively benign situation. What's not a benign situation is the potential knockdown effect of the earthquake in Taiwan, and how that can change some of the calculations for the Chinese military, the PLA. That's not benign. That could be very serious. And this situation with the workers, that 9 of them died, I think it was. It's a tragedy, but it's a little bit more on the spectrum of not benign compared to the ship, but it's not as problematic as probably the earthquake, if we look at this from a metaphysical lens. All right, because I think this is just the fog of war, mistake thing that happened. But obviously something broke down in terms of communication, because they try to orchestrate the actual movement of these workers down the road. So, there probably needs to be some disciplinary action on whoever fired from these. I believe they were from, I think they were shot from airplanes, missiles from airplanes. But there probably needs to be some sort of disciplinary action. If it was through a airplane, if it was a jet, it was probably more than just one. So there was some sort of coordination issue that happened that needs to really be looked at. But there's these curses that can happen to Israel. God does curse Israel. I think it's the theme here. There's also that God does bless Israel. God blesses the Gazans at times, and it curses them at times. Now, when you're talking about the power of the soul roots, as we go through the year and as we go through this longer hundreds of year wave, at this moment in time, there's more blessing on Israel than curse on Israel, and there's more curse on Esau and less blessing on Esau. But that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way for the rest, for the rest of the year. It's going to ebb and flow. And I've already explained that the blessing for Esau will start to take hold in August.
It's both sides know they're coming. Both sides have agreed. The car was well marked. It was very clear. It was World Central Kitchen.
As aid agencies, we provide very, very detailed information to the Israeli government about our transit, our locations, our aid efforts.
The UN chief says the killings reinforce the urgent need for a humanitarian ceasefire.
This is unconscionable. But
see, the Westphalian logic, the international community is trying to use logic to try to solve this problem. Lots of coordination was taking place, but a mistake happened. Now, there probably needs to be disciplinary action on the ones that caused the mistake. And that investigation will ensue. But God let it happen. This is what I mean, that this is one of those things that, this most likely shouldn't have happened, but it did. So there's another variable involved. And it's not a human variable. It's a metaphysical variable. Hopefully you understand some of this lens of looking at this problem that I'm talking about. It's hard to explain it, all right, unless you're a spiritual person, and you probably would be able to explain it better than I. But the thing is that God let this happen, even though it was a mistake, and it was well coordinated. And so these international rule-based kind of thinking, they think they can logically solve this problem between Esau and Jacob. It's like they're missing a big variable, and that's the metaphysical variable. And there are certain things that have to happen independent what others think. There's certain things that, if all the Jews said we don't want the temple, theoretically, all right, hypothetically, let's just say that's all the Jews said they didn't want the temple, it wouldn't matter because the temple would still be coming. See what I mean? There's a metaphysical variable here that's allowing some of these events to be taking place. Not all things are happening, that are, that have some sort of hand of God, using a metaphor, but some sort of hand of God in it. There are things that are just that seem to be, with our feeble mind, just a random event. But there are other things that are not. This gives me the feeling that this is one of those that makes Israel look bad. There is going to be times when you're going to see things that God, the Gazans do or Hamas does, where it could have hurt Israel, but it actually hurts themselves. Classic example, launching missiles that actually end up, launching missiles from Hamas and exploding in the air or misfiring and hitting buildings within Gaza. And, and trying to blame it on Israel, only where the international community can prove that it was actually Hamas lying to the international community. All right. So this is where that curse on the Gazans happen. So, or the curse on Hamas happens. And the international community can see some of the nefarious things that Hamas is doing. Well, this is true also in Israel. A bad thing happened, and it shines light on some of the nefarious things that the Israelis are doing. This is what I mean, that Israel is going to be cursed during this process too, even though that this looks like an accident. But there's an element of the hand of God in this. And we're not smart enough to understand. Nobody is smart enough to understand why those particular individuals had to be killed. Now, I'm sure that there are some Kabbalists, maybe in the future, or maybe even alive today, that can take their names and look at the Hebrew, equivalent of their name and, do some permutations of the actual letters and actually see why they died, how they died, and when they died. But we are not smart enough to go down that road. We'll never be that smart to go down that road. But there are people that are. And, but these are people that will never talk to you, would never be on YouTube or on, these are very, very insular individuals that have a very small crowd. And they're, but there may be a reason why these people had to die. We're just not, we assume that we're in control. We're not, is a big takeaway here. And the letters that make up our name or up our body, if the Kabbalists are correct, where, if you say something, if you say the name of this individual with the proper intent, then you can actually create the body. All right. Yeah, I have a master's and I took lots of science. I know about DNA and RNA and proteins, and that's the biological understanding of how the human body is made up and how it works. But there's a metaphysical part that science isn't capturing. And it's these permutations of the letters. And so through the letters that create the body, while it is going through field development, the whole history of that person is being set, even though we think we have free will. All right. Those letters that are making up this human being as it's developing in utero is already being played out. So we don't know why they had died. It's people say, oh, it's just Israel shot a missile. Well, that's, but there's this longer, deeper history that's already encoded in the name, in these people's names. And when you take the name and you expand it out, if you take the Hebrew version of their name and expand it out, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but you can expand it out and embed it into God's name. You will be able to read a sentence of someone's history. Now, again, we're not smart enough to do this, but there are people that are. All right. So like the people that are listening, you're not smart enough to do this. I'm not smart enough to do this, but there are people that can do this. And you can take the name and expand it and put it into a matrix that is of God's name. And there are different types of matrices that can be used of God's name. There are different types. And you can actually see the history of the individual before it happens. Before it happens. So this is, but it's a deep Kabbalistic thing that I'm talking about. So you don't know why all these events are happening. Now we can get a shadow of what I'm talking about, a shadow of it, not the full, because of our lack of understanding, lack of wisdom. We can get a shadow of this in the Bible code. So a Bible code is part of what I'm talking about here. You can get a shadow of it, maybe a glimmer, but not the full detail. And it's usually after the fact, not before the fact. Now, I'm sure nobody told you that before. We're run by a bunch of idiots, and there are many people that aren't viewing this with the variable of the metaphysics of this. And that variable for certain issues or certain events or certain problems, that variable can be more important or less important. Hopefully that you get a better idea of how I'm viewing this particular incident.
Is an inevitable result of the way the war is being conducted.
Israel has promised an independent investigation.
The strike was not carried out with the intention of harming WCK aid workers. It was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night.
Several aid agencies have now suspended operations, prompting fears the already dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza will worsen at a time when famine is taking hold. Rochelle Harrison-Place, SBS World News.
Iran's president has...
Hello, my name is Ebony Obsidian, and I am here in Raban, South Sudan, at the Doro refugee camp with the IRC team.
Iran's president has warned that the suspected Israeli airstrike on its consular building in Syria's capital, Damascus, will not go unanswered. Israel has not claimed responsibility, but Defence Minister Yoav Gallant has warned that it is operating everywhere to prevent what it calls its enemies gaining strength.
Iran's president has told his cabinet the perpetrators of the consular attack in Damascus will be punished.
به مجاهدان را خدا توفیق بده که در رابطه با این جنایت و جنایت بسیاری که رژیم صهیونیستی مرتکب شده مجازات کنند. مرتکبین این جنایت رو و حامیان این جنایت هولناک رو.
But at an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council requested by Russia, the calls were for de-escalation and accountability.
Let me be very clear. The inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises and personnel must be respected in all cases in accordance with international law.
The Pentagon has confirmed Israel carried out the strike, with Israel saying it will continue to use its reach to defend itself.
אנחנו פועלים בכל מקום, בכל יום, כדי למנוע את ההתעצמות של האויבים שלנו, וכדי להעביר לכל מי שפועל כנגדנו בכל רחבי המזרח התיכון, שהמחיר על פעולה כנגד ישראל יהיה מחיר כבד.
I reiterate the Secretary General's condemnation of the attack.
Syria accused the Americans of enabling and emboldening its ally.
إن بلاد سوريا تحمل مجرمي الحرب في حكومة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وشركائهم في الإدارة الأمريكية المسؤولية الكاملة عن تلك الاعتداءات وتبعاتها على السلم والأمن الإقليميين والدوليين.
Washington, though, keen to stress that America was not involved.
As the White House has stated, the United States had no involvement in the reported strike yesterday in Syria.
And he warned Iran and its proxies not to escalate tensions and not to target US interests in response.
Since the October 7 terrorist attack on Israel, the United States has repeatedly warned Iran not to take advantage of the situation to escalate its long-standing proxy war against Israel and other actors. Iran has ignored this warning.
Iran has previously attacked US troops in the region through its proxies. Gary Cox, SBS World News.
Police in Finland say they're yet to establish a motive for a school shooting which left one child dead and two others critically injured. The suspect is now in police custody. He's a 12-year-old boy from the same school located in the city of Vantaa, just outside the Finnish capital.
All right, so I want to get a little bit more on this whole Iran issue, because I saw something that Iran was planning on doing a retaliatory strike. This is Fox News about death to America.
This part of the scene on the streets of Tehran, Iranian protesters burning American flags and chanting "Death to America" in response to a strike in Syria that killed one of Tehran's top military commanders. Iran is blaming Israel, vowing to retaliate. Robert Greenway is the director of the Center for National Defense at the Heritage Foundation. Great to have you on, Robert, and good morning to you. Just a clip from the Wall Street Journal. The Iranians pay a price in Syria. Israel targets the generals orchestrating Tehran's terror war. What comes of this strike? He wasn't the head of the Quds force, but he was pretty high up there.
That's right. So Israel took a strike holding accountable the Iranian official chiefly responsible for maintaining the relationship, arms, equipment, training, planning, coordination, and funding for Hezbollah in Lebanon, and also for the armed militia groups operating within Syria supporting the Assad regime. And in doing so, they're holding Iran directly accountable. I think Iran was surprised to a certain extent. This strike was the most significant since the bombing of Islamic Jihad organizations in Ma'ad Mubniya in 2008. But as you said, a couple of rungs below Qasem Soleimani in 2020. I think they caught by surprise, but it's likely they're going to apply additional pressure against the United States, believing that the United States is going to be willing to apply pressure to constrain Jerusalem and so thereby achieve their ends without having to directly confront Israel. And again, Israel has provided a path for us to recognize exactly what should be done to hold the Iranians accountable. It's the same individuals who planned to coordinate the attack that killed 3 Americans at the Tom garrison.
Okay, Robert, this is what the Iranian foreign minister says on screen. An important message was sent. He said to the American government, as a support of the Zionist regime, America must be held accountable. That's kind of what you were saying right there. But when you talk about January of 2020 and Soleimani, I think most observers thought there was going to be a significant response, and there wasn't. Will there be one now?
Yeah, the reality is that when confronted, Iran actually backs down. In 70% of the strikes, there's no response at all. In 30%, there's a minimal strike to restore sort of public relations credibility after being embarrassed. But the reality is that Iran, when confronted, doesn't respond. It's just why Israel has established a pattern here. The Trump administration followed it, certainly, but we've seen a lack of response and a loss of deterrence pursued by the Biden administration, a failure to hold Iran accountable.
Okay. On another matter, well, it's all related, right? Jake Sullivan is going to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Is there some peace deal that can be salvaged, I should say, that involves the Saudis and the Israelis at the forefront of this?
Well, the reality is I think it's unlikely. First, because the situation in the Middle East is deteriorating so rapidly. And second, because appeasement of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel's principal enemy is the responsibility of the Biden administration's policies, and I think all of them are cognizant of it. And then third, the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem is at the lowest it's been since at least 2015, and with Riyadh, it's not much better. And lastly, the amount of congressional support required to get over the goal line with what is publicly being discussed would be a heavy lift, but in an election year without preparation, I think it's a very, very difficult path indeed.
Okay, my observation, Robert, is that this administration has slowly warmed up to Saudi Arabia. But it might take an entire 180 in policy to get them to come around entirely. And if Biden were to win the election in November, they would need a significant peace deal to quiet the region that pulls in the Jordanians and pulls in the Egyptians. So you got to start this relationship somewhere.
Well, it's absolutely true. The place to start it is to stop funding the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, threatening the region, including Riyadh. And look, you can't feed cash to its principal enemy and then go to Riyadh and expect to conclude a peace deal. It's just a non sequitur. The real reversal has to take place in policy. And this is taking place in public in an election year. And I fear that a lot of this is public relations more than it is substance. But we all have to be hopeful that a peace deal can be concluded and Israel's relationship with its neighbors can be restored. And Washington plays a central responsibility in this.
Smart stuff. Robert, thanks for coming on today. Nice to have you. Robert Greenway.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling.
This is Al Jazeera about the convoy.
Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bashar. Marwan, I'm just really curious to hear what you thought of that John Kirby press conference, because Kirby's now clearly, I think we can say fairly, is playing defense with all these questions that were being asked of him on what the U.S. thinks of what Israel has done and how can they keep supporting this, and he's dodging bullets out there.
Absolutely. I think listening to Kirby and Blinken today in Paris defending the Israeli war crimes in Gaza gives you a good sense of how far American officials need to go out of their way in order to justify or defend Israeli actions that are indefensible in Gaza. So much so that you can see that the journalists who are asking the questions are so frustrated. Because at the end of the day, right, 6 months later, 33,000 have been killed, mostly women and children. And Mr. Kirby is still, outraged by questions about violations of laws of war and saying, well, we still have to wait and see. Wait and see what exactly?
It was probably miscommunication and an accident. Now, the people that shot the missile from the aircraft probably need to be held accountable and some disciplinary action taken. All right. But most likely this was an accident. Again, though, there was this metaphysical lens where this was allowed to happen by God. We aren't smart enough to understand why. All right. And so let's stop pretending that we understand why, these things happen. But this issue about war crimes, he never talks about Hamas embedding with the civilians in Gaza, increasing the probability of collateral damage. Because Hamas and Hezbollah doesn't care about its citizens. It cares about the optic in the international community to try to get sympathy. And to get that, they need more civilian deaths. They're a religion, not of peace. They're a religion of war and death. And this is this is written in the Bible for a long, long time, that Esau is a killer. All right. And he's going to have to die by the sword. It's a battle between Esau and Jacob. He's coming from Esau.
Right. He was asked specifically, has Israel violated any laws of war? Have they committed any war crimes in the last 5-6 months? He was pretty defensive about that.
Absolutely. And I think here in this question, right, and I'll be curious what our viewers around the world are thinking, or the way they're thinking about this, because I can see that much of the debate
Israel
already
create some sort of war crime? Some of these soldiers. Every war there is. The United States causes war crimes. Russia causes war crimes. The Ukrainians cause war crimes. The UK cause war crimes. The Aussies cause war crime. Every war there's been a war crime. So stop using the term, did they ever? Everybody has. What the right way to look at this is that who's causing more of the problem? And it is Hamas, not Israel. But, this is Al Jazeera coming right from, from the Islamic, headquarters.
of the past few hours. It was about whether it's deliberate or not deliberate. So what do you think, Cyril? You think it's worse if it was deliberate or not deliberate? Because I think it's worse if it's not deliberate.
You think it's worse that it's not deliberate?
Because if it's deliberate, it could be a general...
Think about this. Think about what he just said. It dovetails right into what I'm saying about the thought process with Islam in general and the soul root of Esau. They think morally it's okay to have Hamas embedded into the population to increase the collateral damage. And he is trying to get some sort of morality by saying, is it deliberate or not deliberate? Let's rewind that for a sec here.
I think it's worse if it's not deliberate.
It's worse when it's not deliberate.
Because if it's deliberate, it could.
It's worse when it's not deliberate. So if it's on accident, it's worse. So if it's deliberate and Esau embeds into the population, aka Hamas, all right, then it's okay. That's how I interpret what this guy's saying.
A general, it could be a colonel, an engineer who's manning these drones, or a pilot who's manning an airplane, or what have you, that decided to take an action deliberately against the aid company. It could be a high-ranking official in the military. But the way things have been happening in Gaza, if they're not deliberate, they are certainly systematic. And that's much worse than one individual or several individual deliberate actions.
You're saying essentially if this was not deliberate.
You know, there's two things here that how I want to parse this out. There is the aspect of Esau embedding, Hamas is embedding into the population to increase the collateral damage by the Israelis, which is a war crime on Hamas. Hamas is causing a war crime. Al Jazeera doesn't talk about that. Then there is and that's a deliberate. So he's not shining a light on that deliberateness, but he makes the statement that being not deliberate is even worse because it is systemic. Well, you can have systemic being deliberate, like what's going on with Hamas, and that's a problem. But remember what I said about the metaphysical? And, you know, he's bringing up the term systemic. These things are happening because of a curse and a blessing that is ebbing and flowing between the Palestinians and the Israelis as this war is happening. So there's a curse sometimes on Israel during these operations, and sometimes there's a blessing. And the same thing on the side of Hamas, right? So there's this battle of the twins. I know this sounds crazy, but there is a metaphysical battle between the twins of Esau and Jacob that we're seeing on Al Jazeera playing out. Now we can only understand it through kind of, you know, of our, you know, from our perspective, you know, based on our education or our religious affiliation. But what is shocking to me is he never brings up how Hamas causes war crimes being embedded in the population. Because in their religion, it is okay for 15,000 children and women to be killed in war. To try to demonize their enemy in the eyes of the international community. That's the strategy that Esau has.
Striking this aid convoy, it kind of means that the killing has gone on autopilot.
Absolutely, because I'll give you a few examples. Take, for example, the most stark example of all examples. When the Israeli soldiers shot at Israeli captives holding white flags, was that deliberate? But certainly that was not deliberate. And I'm sure the Israeli soldiers would not want to shoot at Israeli citizens held captives in Gaza holding white flags. But they are clearly trigger happy, or let me be a bit more objective.
If you're in war and you're in a situation where it is probably the worst type of scenario to be in, urban war, the stress level on these soldiers are extreme, and there's going to be mistakes made, and friendly fire is going to happen. That's what that was what happened. All right, they just didn't know what the real situation was, and it's not about being trigger happy. It's just that being in that urban environment, So you got this guy that, has a pocket square and a suit on, but, doesn't bother to put a tie on. All right. Pontificating about not fully understanding the full stress of the actual urban environment that these soldiers are in right now, or what they went through when there was friendly fire. Amazing.
You're ready. Shoot. Look at what happened to Ashifa, not just the last few days or couple of weeks. Look at what happened to Ashifa Hospital. Look at what happened to all the hospitals. Was that deliberate or not deliberate? Look at the death, the killing.
What about burning the babies and mutilating the bodies on October 7th that Hamas did when they crossed over the border? Was it deliberate or not deliberate? I'm telling you, people don't get it. What happened on October 7th changed the psyche of many Israelis. Now, there is infighting that's going on with the Israelis, and I'm sure Al Jazeera is hoping that infighting continues, because that sets on a curse on Israel. But there are many Israelis and other Jews around the world that is just fed up with it all. And they want it done. Get it done. They don't care about the casualties. They don't care. They want it done. Get it done. They just don't care.
Of 20,000+ children and women. Was that deliberate or not so deliberate?
Yeah, exactly. Building on your point, if since here we have the Israeli Prime Minister saying, essentially, this was not intentional, it was a mistake, mistakes happen. What does that then mean about the 32,000 Palestinians who were killed and whether or not that was intentional?
And there's a bit of a snobbish.
What about Hamas embedding in the population, causing the collateral damage increase? Just get the job done, because if you kick the can down the road, it'll be 60,000 children or 100,000 children. Just get the job done.
Chutzpah in his tone, his dismissal. Oh, it was tragic. We will look into it. And of course, Secretary of State Blinken says, we demand that Israel does a swift and impartial. How would Israel want to do an impartial of its own crimes in Gaza? How do you expect an Israeli army that is mired in the death and destruction of tens of thousands, displacements of a million or two, to be impartial about something like that? But there's a pattern here, and we spoke about the past 6 months. The killing of UNRWA. How many people of UNRWA have been killed already? Some 100+, right? Yeah. Of UNRWA. So there's a lot of.
I think we're closer to 200, but I don't have the exact number.
So there's a lot of aid workers have been killed in Gaza, right? So we agree about that. But how many journalists have been killed in Gaza? How many of our colleagues have been killed? How many members of their families have been killed? Okay, so it's not deliberate, right?
We can add to that health workers, aid workers, obviously.
Children, hospitals, engineers, academic.
It's not deliberate, but let's not worry about the deliberateness of Hamas embedded in the population. All right, okay.
Nurses, but also all the civilian infrastructures. What about the 5 or 6 or 7, I don't know the number of universities that they were all destroyed down to to rubble? So yes, I understand the debate, and this is all the questions about, was this deliberate or not deliberate? Okay, we will investigate. My worry is that it's not deliberate.
I just got a news announcement. Some 70 coal miners are trapped after the Taiwan quake. It was the strongest to hit the island in 25 years, killing 9, injuring, I don't know how many did they injure. This is through the Wall Street Journal. So 70 coal miners are trapped.
Not my worry. Almost my analysis is that even if it's not deliberate, that's just as bad, if not worse. Because the fact is that the Central Kitchen have coordinated their coordinates with the Israeli military. The Israeli military know where they are. So if they didn't do it deliberately, that means they are so trigger ready to shoot at anything that moves in Gaza. That's why
I think that it was a big mistake, but God let it happen. We don't understand why. We aren't smart enough to understand why. You know, good things happen to good people sometimes. Good things happen to bad people sometimes. Good, bad things happen, also to good people too. So, we don't understand what happened.
When we were talking about them shooting at the Israeli civilians with white flags, we said, what about all the Palestinians that were white flags and they killed them, right? So there's a systematic.
What about taking nonprofit money and building a hospital right over a bunker that was known that was Hamas? Why would you build a hospital right over a bunker, a military bunker? Because that is the way to hide. And that is the way to increase collateral damage if your enemy is going to attack you. Esau is a smart person. To say that Esau's not a smart person, no. We got to say that Esau is a smart person. He's conniving. He is a killer. He's a hunter.
Violence that is being carried by the Israelis. There's a systematic use of force, trigger happy, trigger ready to use. There's anger, there's frustration, and there's revenge on the part of the Israeli army. They are still angry 6 months later about what happened October 7th. They are not acting like a professional army. They're acting like a vengeful tribe is very hateful of the people in Gaza. And they are echoing what the president said almost 6 months ago when he said there are no innocents in Gaza. That definitely includes the aid workers. Because look, the attack on UNRWA, right? The UN organization that has been for decades helping Palestinians.
And the largest aid organization in the strip.
And if I may remind our viewers.
And the most corrupt. Just remember that. Don't forget about the corruption.
Well, no one has mentioned that in the past. Just you need to study the history of this conflict and of UNRWA. UNRWA started its operations after 1948, serving Palestinians and Israelis until 1952. Israelis were helped by UNRWA until 1952. Israel was on its feet to be able to help its own citizens. So the fact that Israel has attacked something like UNRWA for all these years and demonized UNRWA just because 6 of its members, 6 out of 13,000 have been accused of joining in with the October 7th, 7 of 13,000. As a good number of observers said, they're surprised that there are 6, not 600 or 6,000, right? But living in Gaza, being involved in all that. I think a lot of people were curious to barge through the borders and see what's happening on the other side. But be that as it may, Israel has been trigger happy using force, using violence, using bombs. And the United States has been trigger happy, trigger ready to provide it with the weapons. And that's why Kirby, Blinken, Biden, and others have been defending Israel, because they are complicit. Just the last few days, the United States has once again declared that it will be selling more weapons. It will be transferring more arms to Israel, including 2,000-pound bombs. Again, 2,000-pound bombs. For what exactly? For what use in Gaza? So I am disheartened by what happened.
You need the 2,000-pound bombs as bunker busters. Because you dug in.
To the aid workers in Gaza, but I'm just as disheartened and even more for the 40,000 perhaps now that have been killed in Gaza, mostly women and children. And for all the medical workers, Palestinian medical workers. Today we heard some reports from Shifa Hospital, deliberate or not deliberate, all hospitals in Gaza, perhaps we said half of one in Rafah, they're all destroyed. I think there is a systematic use of violence. There is a readiness to use violence and force and excessive force, hyper use of force in Gaza.
Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, Marwan Bashar, thank you very much for that. We're going to take a very short break.
Do you think that if the United States went through on October 7th across, let's say, the border of Texas and Mexico, that there wouldn't be, and it was similar? Don't you think the United States would use excessive force on the invading army? And it probably would be a lot more bloody and a lot more violent than what the Israelis are doing. Anyone that would, what it basically is Esau, aka Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, all right, took a bet. They lost the bet, and now they're begging for the international community to bail them out. They're going, mercy, mercy, mercy. And the Israelis are going, no, you're going to die. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get vitamin D3. It helps with gene expression. It's a gene expression cofactor. And by being a gene expression cofactor, you're going to be able to have the proper cellular processes happen in your cell. All right. It will help to absorb also calcium, and it'll help with apoptosis of infected cells. That's why when you're sick, taking D3 will help. I take 10,000 individual units. I take 5,000 in the morning, and at night another 5,000. Vitamin C, important because it's an antioxidant. It'll help to boost up your immune system. You take it every day, and it'll help with your skin health. In addition, if you're not feeling well, take a double dose. Resveratrol. This is also an antioxidant. It's part of the anti-aging protocol, and it will help to get rid of senescent cells. And lastly, I have C60. I have it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, and an 8 ounce configuration. You can get it in coconut or avocado. This one is avocado. You can get it in coconut or avocado oil. And this molecule, it's a 60 carbon molecule. They'll soak up free radicals and help to improve the mitochondrial health. By improving the mitochondrial health in your cell, you're going to get more ATP and you're going to have more energy. By having more energy, you're going to be moving around more. You're going to have better cellular processes. Your neurons are going to fire better. So take this on a regular basis. I take a teaspoon of it a day, or you can take a full dropper if you get the dropper version. And this, if you take it every day, is going to soak up those free radicals, and you're going to start seeing an improvement. Take it on an empty stomach. It's the best absorption. If you work out, take it before your workout, because what will happen is you're going to actually recover quicker. So this is a very potent antioxidant. It's a great product, and it's part of the pillar. It's part of the 3-pillar system to improve your immune system and to slow down that aging process. So it's part of my anti-aging protocol. The pillar of the anti-aging protocol is the structural nanosilver liquid. Take a teaspoon of it a day. Bring down the inflammation with turmeric and ashwagandha. Right? Turmeric and ashwagandha. That's the second pillar. And then the third pillar is the C60, which soaks up all those free radicals. Then you add stuff to it to help with mental acuity, which is the clarity factor, gene expression, D3, the resveratrol to help get rid of the senescent cells, the vitamin C to improve the skin and to help with the immune system. And it's an antioxidant. When you add this stuff, the B complex, the good night formula, when you start adding this stuff, you're going to start really noticing a major difference. If you do this on a regular basis, a major difference in how your body is improving, getting healthier, and slowing down the aging process. Thank you for listening. Please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All the links are in the description. You can also help with my news coverage by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You click the website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and on the homepage at the very bottom, there are links for you to donate. You can also help support my news coverage by being a paid follower for my Patreon channel. I have different tiers that will give you different access to different videos that are tied to my pulmonology lecture series. So please be a paid member for my channel on Patreon. That helps to support my work. I appreciate all the support that you have given me over the years, and please go to the store, pay attention to what I'm saying about these supplements and how you can slowly improve your health, reduce the aging process, and boost up your immune system. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.